Hello, everyone. How are you? Welcome to today's webinar. And before I go any further, I'd just like to say hello to Sergio. Sergio, this is live. Would we have it any other way? It is absolutely thrilling to see you again. And today we'll be speaking about a topic which Claudia and I are very passionate about. And what we've been thinking about is how we could get kids to be really good at show and tell. And so the topic of today's webinar is show and tell, let's catch kids at being good. Now, before I go any further, I'd like to take just a step back and explain to you what we mean by show and tell. I'm sure that you will have heard of, oh dear, I forgot her name now, Carol Reed, that's it. Sorry, let me explain. I just saw Claudia online and was distracted. So a big hello to Claudia, thank you for joining us. Also to Katerina, who I saw just now as well. Right, now I was saying that this business of catching kids at being good comes from one of Carol Reed's famous talks, in which she speaks about us setting up the necessary conditions to create an optimal environment in which children will naturally be good. So this is what we'd like to do today. Now, before I go any further, can I ask you please to type in the chat box how you are feeling? Has this been a long day? Are you tired? Are you full of energy? Or are you excited to be with us today? Let's have a look at your energy level. Could you type in on a scale from 1 to 10, how are you feeling? And this is going to be very important so I know what I can count on today. Sandra's saying tired, but luckily Marie as well is full of energy. Let's have, oh, a 10 cell. I can hardly believe that. It looks like we're in luck. Right, Van is saying that she's tired, but she's going to recharge her batteries with our webinar. Okay, well then I only have one more question. And my question today is, do you trust me enough to be your teacher? And this for me is really important. And I think that we need to think about this with our students because unless they trust us, we really have nothing to teach them. So please could you set my mind at ease and tell me whether you trust me enough to be my teacher. Alexander, thank you so much. It's always good to know that your students trust you. So does Sal. Cool. Right. Thank you, Carla. So this means glory, glory. Let's start an exciting story. And for today, we just have 3 objectives. And I say just 3 because we have an hour to do this. So we're going to start off by taking a step back and thinking about what is a good speaking task. And this will lead us straight into our second objective, which is thinking about what are the conditions that we need to catch our students at being good. And then Claudia and I would like to ask you for a favor. Would you agree to a little favorzinho, just a tiny one? Would that be okay? Thank you, Elder, for replying so quickly. Right, what I'd like to do is to invite you to evaluate our students. So we'd like to show you some of our real students in the flesh and blood and ask you if you would be willing to have a look and to see what the result of this action plan has been. Sandra, thank you so much for agreeing. Now let me ask you please to evaluate them with a teacher's heart, because I haven't chosen the best students. The best students are always good no matter what you do. Instead, what we've done is chosen, you know, those students when people tell you that you have them, or when you tell them that you have them, they look at you and go, pois, right. Those which are just a little bit, shall we say, challenged to learn English, if you know what I mean. All right, so those are the students that we'll be sharing with you today. Are you ready to have some fun? Can you type in the chat box and I'll know that we're ready to get going? All right, let's see. Okay, so off we go. Right, now, when we try to think about a good speaking task, perhaps the place to start is with the guiding documents that give us some orientation on what a good speaking task is. And this inevitably implies speaking about the perfil and the aprendizagens. Now, don't worry, I know it's the end of a long day, so I'm not going to be speaking about the perfil in lots of detail. But I do want to show you something that's quite exciting about the perfil, because for the first time in all of these documents that we have from the Ministry of Education, there is a document that truly understands how difficult it is to do speaking. And so it doesn't evaluate speaking as language, in other words, as one bit of content to evaluate. Instead, it sees speaking almost as a pyramid with 3 vertices. And I'd like to show you the implications that this has for our classroom and for our show and tell moments. So what is the first vertex? As you can see, the first vertex is language. And so we see linguagens and textos. And this makes perfect sense because, well, if they're doing speaking, they need language, right? But I want to call your attention to this little detail. For the first time, we have a document that is clearly telling us that it is perfectly okay to bring the mother language into the classroom. And so what we want to do is we want to get the kids speaking, even if every now and again they need one little palavrinha in Portuguese because they don't have that vocabulary. And so what this means is that the profile is opening the door for a multilingual approach to speaking rather than just using English. And this for me is quite liberating as a speaker because I never for 1 minute forget my mother tongue when I'm speaking in Portuguese. And so, yes, I will confess that I say creative things like eu vou ir. Can you imagine why? Well, that really is because of the future, isn't it? I will, eu vou, go in the infinitive ir. So do you see that part of speaking is also bringing that mother language in, and the perfil is telling us this. Now, the perfil goes a step further and tells us that when it comes to speaking, we need to make a distinction between speaking face-to-face and speaking online. And so we'll need to train these skills with the students. And it also speaks about this multimodal approach to speaking. In other words, you can speak with words, but you're also looking at my PowerPoint as I speak with you, and you're looking at images and different effects. And in a few minutes, we'll be hearing audio. So there are lots of different ways to get your message across. And we need to make students aware of this, or at least begin making them aware of this. So that's the first vertex, language. What's the second vertex? Well, that would be information. Now, the profile is telling us that we need to teach students that we need to have an information gap to keep people interested. And so if you know exactly what I'm going to tell you, are you going to listen to me for very long? Or are you going to go into the mode of what you need to do next? Hang on, let's see, I have to cook dinner, and what am I going to cook? I forgot to defrost something, right? Now, if this happens with us, it happens with children too. So what the profile is telling us is that we need to design a task in which there is some sort of information gap, in which the kids have to go and find information to then honestly share with everybody else. Now, I'm sure that we've all seen speaking presentations in which you can see that the students have copied the information off the net. And sometimes it's not the fact that they've copied the information, but it's that the Meizinha has copied the information for them, if you know what I mean. Hi, Marta, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So the profile goes a step further and tells us that we need to design a kind of speaking task in which they can transform that information that they've done research on into concrete knowledge, right? In other words, they need to personalize that information. It can't just be a speaking task about anything in general, but it needs to be about what they are doing in concrete. Right, now, we also need to teach them that they need to use different types of tools to do that information, and there are consequences to this. So if I'm using a poster in which I want to show you my show and tell, I can't turn my back like this to you, because if I do that, it affects information. And so these kind of things are other skills and tools which we also have to bring into the classroom. And we need to work on this as we work on the speaking task. Right, so that's the second pyramid. This leaves us the third vertex of our pyramid. And I think we'll all agree that no speaking presentation is complete without having body language thrown into the equation. In other words, my words might be saying one thing and transmitting one message, but if my body language is saying something else, hi Manuela, thanks for joining us, then you are going to get a different kind of message. And let me show you what I mean. Right, could you type in the chat box how excited you feel by the next message I'm going to give you? Okay? Right, here goes. I have to get very serious for this because this is difficult to do. Hello, everyone. Very excited to be with you today. This is going to be a wonderful webinar. How exciting was that, right? Hi, Dina. I'm sorry that you've just joined us with this terrible demonstration of body language. Carla, who is the perfect student, is saying that she feels very excited. Alexandra is saying that she feels really excited. But is my body language helping you? Ilda, I'd have to agree with you. My body language is telling you that this is going to be boring. So it's really important that we start teaching the children how they can bring in body language to strengthen their message and then to gain empathy with the audience. So this is the next thing that the profile tells us. Communication is important because if we establish empathy with the people that we're speaking to, well, our talk will go much, much better. So that's what the profile is telling us. Now, what are the aprendizagens telling us? Well, the aprendizagens really show us what we need to do to design our speaking task. And if you have a look, you'll see that there isn't much of a difference between the kind of task that we need to design for the terceiro ano and the kind of task that we need to design for the quarto ano. So it's natural that the kind of information that we'll be asking them to speak about will still be very elementary information, and the vocabulary will also be elementary. Now, the main difference is the level of language, because in the terceiro ano you can see that the profile is asking us to deal with a language that is limited, whereas in the quarto ano, it's already asking us to deal with very, very simple language. The other big difference is that in the quarto ano, we start asking students to work on lenga-lengas and rhymes. In other words, the profile is asking us to deal with pronunciation. Now, I don't know how you feel about this, but I have a bone to pick with a profile when it comes to this recommendation, because I think that the minute we start teaching them English, you have to start teaching them pronunciation. And the reason why I say this is that if you start learning a mistake from the beginning, it's really difficult to unlearn it. Let me give you an example. Have you ever had a menino say red instead of read or something of the sort? If you have, feel free to type in the chat box so I don't feel alone. Now, as Lena's saying, once they start saying head, how difficult is it to unteach this head business and teach them that it isn't head, but rather the queen needs to be much more elegant when saying this. And so she will say red. And so this is the main reason why I would defend that it makes no sense to start teaching pronunciation only in the 4th year. But that, Isabel, you've just given another wonderful example. Shoes instead of choose, yes, or head instead of head, right? All these little mistakes, in my opinion, need to be solved as soon as they appear. And so for this reason, I would say that it is important to start doing the pronunciation from the terceiro ano. Now we know what kind of task we want. We know that speaking is really a pyramid with 3 vertices. So does this mean that when we go into our classrooms and ask the kids to do and show and tell, their presentation is going to be absolutely fantastic? Or am I dreaming? Well, I think you'll agree with me that we are going to need a little bit more magic before we'll be able to catch the kids at being good. And so at the moment, I think we need to take a step back and to think about what we really want to catch the kids at being good at. So I'd like to share some of the things that Claudia and I look out for in our show and tell presentations. Now you will see that there are lots of items on this screen. Don't panic. You don't have to choose them all. But I am going to ask you to have a look at this list, which we've just brainstormed on the slide in no particular order, and to choose the top 3. If you could only choose 3, which 3 things would you choose to look out for in the students' presentations? And I say this because I think that if you choose something like fluency, you cannot choose accuracy in the primary classroom, simply because the children just don't have enough language to be fluent and to be accurate at the same time. So, are you up for my challenge? Have a look at this lovely, inspiring list and type in the 3 that you would choose. And let's see if we would choose the same. So, are you going for creativity and originality? Do you want the children to have a good range of vocabulary? Are you going to be focusing on pronunciation? Anita, you can't see? Well, I will read them out for you so that you can type them in. Are you going to think about the time? So you want them to speak for 40 seconds. Do you prefer the content or the topic? Are you worried about digital literacy? Or are you more focused on reading notes? Is it fluency that catches your fancy or accuracy? Right, now thank you for those who started typing in the chat box, and it is flying away. I see that we have creativity, Selena. I agree. Pronunciation and vocabulary. Sao is saying that it's more about the range of vocabulary. Susanna takes a step back and says only vocabulary. Anna is saying creativity, body language, and fluency. Sylvia is saying the range of vocabulary and creativity. Lots of pronunciation, lots of vocabulary and content. And all of these answers are amazing answers. All of them reflect the profile and those 3 vertices, all right? I see lots of pronunciation, lots of content, lots of fluency. Right, would you like to see Claudia and my answers? If so, would you type in the chat box and I'll satisfy your curiosity about what we personally value in our classrooms. Let's have a look. How curious are you today? Yeah, I see some more vocabulary and pronunciation, some more content. Yeah, are you curious, Sal? Right, now before I show you our answers, the first thing that I'd like to say is that you need to choose either between 3 to 5 topics or aspects that you are going to be evaluating. It is impossible to evaluate all of these in the primary classroom. So why are we saying 3? Well, because 3 is the magic number. Do you know why it's the magic number? Curiosity killed the cat, says so. Well, it's the magic number because there is papai, pa filho, and pa Espírito Santo. So if it works for God, it's going to work in our language classrooms too. Right, so have a look at the 3 that we've chosen. Actually, we've done a little bit of cheating. So we've started off by making a little bit of a distinction between the terceiro ano and the quarto ano. And in the terceiro ano, we're going to start off with the content or the topic. And I'll explain why. The kids may have a wonderful presentation about pets. But if we've asked them to speak about food, are we going to be happy with that presentation? Let's have a look at your reactions in the chat box. But I think that I can read your minds from here and tell you that it's not going to meet the needs. So the content of the presentation is important, and the aprendizagens and the perfil have told us this as well. Then we go for fluency. And with the meninges that I'm going to show you just now, you're going to see that they are not accurate, nor do we really worry about them not being accurate. Instead, we're more worried about them being fluent, about keeping that conversation going. And then, as I explained just now, we're worried about pronunciation. So it doesn't matter that they don't know an awful lot of vocabulary, but what we want them to do is to start off by pronouncing the vocabulary so that we can all understand it. And then, as you've seen, and as many of you have said, we're also worried about having body language and eye contact. So that is very, very important. Now, if we're just worried about the essential vocabulary in the terceiro ano, we're going to want to go a little bit further in the quarto ano and bring a range of vocabulary, well, still minimal and elementary, but getting them to use more verbs, more nouns, and more adjectives. And so we're slowly going to put a foot in accuracy, which will lead us to be able to start working on that creativity and originality, but never forgetting the body language that needs to reflect and mirror the kind of message that they are using their English to transmit. Right? So now we know what kind of speaking task we need. We also know what the aprendizagens tell us to do, and we know what skills we're going to be looking out for in our speaking task. So does this mean that all our students are ready for the speaking presentation, or should I say show and tell, and that they are all going to be marvelous? Or am I daydreaming? What do you think? I agree. We're going to have to create a few more conditions to guarantee that we'll be able to catch all of our students at being good. Right, so what does this mean? Well, it means that we're ready to move on to our second objective. Anna, I knew that you'd say that I'd been daydreaming. So let's take a closer look at what the conditions are that we need to create to make sure that daydreaming becomes a very real reality in our classrooms. Well, the first thing that I would say is that we need to take a step back and we need to activate our children's brain. In other words, we need to try to remember what it was like to be 7 or 8 or 9 again, and to imagine what good looks like. When we say we want a good show and tell, do the students understand exactly what it is that we like? And I think you'll agree with me that many times they have a different concept of good. And I'll give you an example of this. We work a lot on our show and tell presentations. And on show and tell day, they come into the classroom and say, oh, Vanessa, teacher, I've practiced a lot. And then they do the presentation. And can you guess what it's like? Mais ou menos. And when I ask them, how many times did you practice? Can you guess what number they say? Would you like to type in the chat box? So remember, in their opinion, they've practiced a lot. So a lot is more than one, right? But how many times is a lot in a child's brain? Oh, yes. We do have to give them guidelines. Susanna, I could give you a kiss now. Mafalda, you too. Twice. Now, is 2 times enough for you to decorar your show and tell? Well, research tells us that it isn't, because we need to practice our show and tell at least 5 times before we learn all the content off by heart. And then 6, 7, and 8 are going to be about the details. In other words, body language, looking at the audience, feeling comfortable, pointing to our poster, right? So twice is way less than what they should be doing. And so if this is true, then I would defend that it means that we need to explain to them direitinho what it is that we want them to do in the show and tell, so that then they can just see and replicate. And what I'd like to do now is to show you the speaking brief that Claudia and I have been using with our young learners. Now, you know us teachers, we've always got a trabalhinho for the students. So I'm going to ask you, please, to have a look at the speaking brief as I speak with it, and then to type in the chat box whether you think that this would help. And some of you, Annabella has already jumped the gun and suggested that we do need to give them a model. Annabella, I couldn't agree with you more. But before we look at the model, let's have a look at the speaking brief. Right, so have a look at it. What we wanted the students to do was a presentation in the 4th year in which they were going to be presenting their favorite pet. So we've been working on pets, and now their task is in their show and tell to show us their pets. And for that, we've created this kind of show and tell. So let me talk you through this in case the writing on the screen is a little small. So you'll see in the beginning, we have a little brief, and the brief is in Portuguese. Now remember, the perfil tells us that we can bring in Portuguese into the English classroom to make sure that the students can understand. And so it says, nesta unidade, vais fazer uma breve apresentação sobre my favorite animal. Yes, Sylvia, I'm sorry that it's small, but I will try and read this for you, okay? Right, so what does this mean? They are speaking about my favorite animal. And now what we want to do is to show them what they can do next. So it says, certificate that your presentation has the seguinte estrutura. So have a look. Point 1. Começa por saudar os teus colegas. Now, if we were in the classroom, I'd say, children, what kind of language can we use to saudar, to say hello in English? And perhaps you would humor me and type in the chat box. Well, you'll see that in the brief, we're going to give children different types of language because we have different types of learners. Philippa, don't worry, I will gladly share the PowerPoint with you at the end, and you will receive it in a few days' time. Right, now have a look. For those students that are really a little challenged when it comes to learning languages, we have a very, very simple way of starting, which is just hi. But those who can do a little bit more have a hello. And those who can do more still have good morning or good afternoon. Regina is a fantastic student, and so she's putting the two together. Now, remember, you don't just start off by speaking. You start off by saying hello to your audience. And then the next thing that you do is diz qual é o teu animal favorito. And so what this means is that we're going to go into describing what the animal is. Now, Anna, don't worry. I know it's difficult to see, but when we give you the handouts for this, you'll be able to see this perfectly, and then you'll be able to have it in an editable format as well. Right, so the students can now use the language function of my favorite animal is the, and then whatever the animal is. The third point in the presentation is descreve as cores and the tamanho of the animal. In other words, very, very concrete. Tell us what it's like. And the language that we're giving students is simple language like it is brown and black. Or it is very big or very small. So you can see that the students know exactly what they have to say, and then we give them the language to scaffold that. Next, you need to dar a tua opinião about the animal or present a fact that is interesting that most people wouldn't know. Now remember the perfil. The perfil is telling us an information gap. And Anita is already telling us that it's a cat, right? And finally, when you finish your presentation, you can't just say, acabei, acabei, but you need to round it off. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do that with our last point, despede-te dos teus colegas. So an easy language function for weaker students, bye-bye. A neutral one for average students, goodbye, and slightly more puxadinho for the shiny stars in the classroom, goodbye, everyone. So as you can see, they now know the topic and they know the structure of the presentation. In other words, we have linguagem and we have the content, but we still need the third vertex of the aprendizagens and the perfil. And so for this reason, we're going to give them tips that will help them with the body language. So we're saying, don't forget, make a desenho bonito for your apresentação, right? In other words, remember that multimodality of communication. Bring something that you can point to and make what you're saying very visual. Then, treinar a tua apresentação. And just now, I think it was Sal, pardon me if I'm confusing the names, but I think that it was Sal who was saying we need to be very specific when we speak to students and tell them exactly how many times. So we're going to tell them treinar a apresentação at least 7 times. 5, so you know the content, and 2 to 3, so that you start worrying about the little details, right? And then don't forget, when you speak to your audience, look them in the eye. And don't forget to point to the desenho. And so at this part of the talk, we are going to, or of the brief, we are going to explain to them how you point. Now, can I ask you if you've ever heard about the conchinha? Have you ever heard about the conchinha technique to pointing? Can you type in the chat box so I know if you have? Right, Lena is saying the part of the desenho you can't model for them, but you can get the different classes to model for each other, so you can show them other classes' work. And that usually motivates them and sets the bar and makes them very, very competitive. Right, now Sam is saying she's never heard about the conchinha, so let me show you. Right, the conchinha is about learning to use your hands. So can I please ask you to show me your left hand? And I mean your left hand. I don't mean this left hand. I mean the real left hand, right? Can you show me the left hand? And I'm going to raise it a little higher so you can see me because, well, in a digital format, you can't see my whole body. Can you please pour some super glue over your left hand, right? Now, you know what happens when we pour super glue? You can't move it anymore. Don't forget that. It's got super glue. Have you got super glue? Yeah? Okay. Now for your right hand, can you please make a little conchinha? Can you see how it's just a little conchinha, right? And now place that conchinha on top of your left hand and be sure to show your thumbs. Now, why? Well, those people who know a lot about body language tell us that when we show our thumbs, people trust us. Now we want to point to the design. So what are we going to do? This hand has got super glue. Remember, it can't move, right? Now we're going to take the conchinha and we're just going to take it and point to the back, right? And then check that we're pointing in the right direction. And when we finished, we take the conchinha and we put it back, speak some more. And when we need to point, conchinha again and point, right? So this will show the students from the very beginning what they should be doing with their hands. If you feel that this is too complicated, you can ask them to hold a pen, and as they are holding the pen, they don't feel as nervous. But I warn you, you have to choose the pen very, very carefully, because if it's one of those clicking pens that goes click, 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 it's very disconcerting. So you need a very basic pen like this one that I have over here. You know those normal Bics? And now if the students are holding a pen, even if they are very, very nervous and waving it around, in terms of body language, they don't feel as nervous because they are grounded. And when you look at them, it just looks like they are holding a pen to stress the important things instead of seeing hands fly all over the show. So if you prefer, you can start off with the pen and then teach them the conchinha later on. Right, now my question. Does this brief help the children understand so that I should be doing in the show and tell? Could you type in the chat box? Oh, Annabella, I've also had a few that cried a lot. So these techniques are really important. And it is important that we create the kind of conditions to catch them at feeling good and being good so that they don't give up on speaking even before it started. Okay, well, the feedback is coming in. Houston, we can hear you. And Cecilia is saying that it's good support. Carla definitely agrees that this will help. So does Regina. Ariana is saying that it's a great idea. Anna is also agreeing. Well, Margarita, you're right. There will always be some students that need extra help or that don't want the help. But you know what they say? You can take a camel to a well, but you can't make it drink, right? But slowly we're going to get them started. Right, now, once you've done this in the class, and it's not enough to just give them the speaking brief. Usually I print this out and give it to them so that they can take it home and the mãezinho and paizinho can see what they have to do. But it's usually not enough just to give them a speaking brief. And the reason is that we then need to go a step further and explain to them how it is that we know that they are being good. And so this leads me to the wonderful rubrics that we've had to create. Now, in today's webinar, I'm not going to be teaching you how to do a rubric because I assume that you already know how to do one, and also because in a very short while, we'll be showing the new baby. And as you can imagine, the new baby comes with a capinha that is bem gordinha. And I'm not allowed to tell you anything about the new baby yet. But let me just say that perhaps you don't need to learn how to make speaking briefs. all you need to do is just adapt them to the students that you have. But at this point, what I'm going to do with the students is ask the different students what mark it is that they would like to get. So, Annabella Mendes, can you hear me, Annabella? Annabella, we have a speaking task next week, a show and tell, and I'd like to know what mark you would like to get. Would you like to get a bon, a suficiente, a bon, or a muito bon? Annabella, tell me. Right, Annabella can hear, so this is a good sign. Annabella, what mark would you like to get? A suficiente, bon, or muito bon? Annabella? Let's see what she says. Anna is going to want a muito bom. I can see. Ah, so does Annabella, muito bom. Well, Annabella, you have to look at this column of the brief. So you have to do all these things direitinho. And now I'm going to explain pontinho by pontinho exactly what it is that Annabella needs to do so that she understands what good looks like for a muito bom. Now, remember what I told you, choose 3 to 5. So this means that in the first term, your speaking brief only has 3 criteria. In the second term, you add another one. And in the third term, another one still, right? So giving the children time to master these skills. Now, once Annabella has understood exactly what it is that she has to do, I'm going to find another student like the ones I'm going to show you today and ask them what mark they would want. And not all students want a muito bom. Some are happy with a suficiente, right? So now I'm going to choose a concrete example. Of course, being English teachers, you all want muito bom. So let's imagine that Pedro wants a suficiente. And now I'm going to say, Pedro, Annabella is going to be working very hard. But you, Pedro, can play PlayStation on Saturday because all you need to do is these things. And again, I'm going to explain to Pedro and the rest of the class exactly what these different points mean on my rubric. I never explain what bom is, because the kids easily understand that bom is bocadinho de muito bom and bocadinho de suficiente. Mix them together, bling, you have bom. But at this point, the students understand exactly what they need to do for me to say that is super cool. And this is going to be very important because as the students present, I also get them to self-evaluate each other. And the reason why they can do this direitinho is that we've had a look at the speaking brief so they know exactly what to do. And we've had a look at the rubric so they know exactly what good looks like. So this means that we can now go the extra mile and start evaluating the students. Remember my favor at the beginning of the webinar. Are you ready to evaluate my students? But I ask you to do so with a big teacher's heart. So yeah, they are not the best students in the classrooms, but I do promise you that they are very queridos and that they've tried. And before we go any further, I'd like to tell you a little bit about these students. When we first started show and tell, they were so nervous that they would cry. And I can't quite remember, I think it was Annabella who said that her students also cried in presentations sometimes. Right, so they would be very, very, very nervous. And they would be so nervous that they didn't want to go to the front of the classroom. And in the beginning, they had to start by doing it in their place. Only after a few times did they get the resilience to do this. So please, can you promise me that you'll be evaluating them with a teacher's heart? The idea will be at the end of watching them, yes, Patricia, some really are very, very nervous. Right, I'm going to ask, whether you think that what you see is a desgraça, or is it more or less suficiente, bom ou muito bom? Okay, now I'm crossing my fingers that technology is going to work.
Hi,
Yes, Pedro.
About my favorite animal. My favorite animal is turtle. Turtle it's green and brown. It can swim in, and and fly. Turtles are fantastic. Thank you and goodbye.
Okay, there you have it, Pedrito. So, would you like to type in the chat box what you thought? Was this a desgraça, or did we manage to catch Pedro at being good when it comes to show and tell? Teresa, I could give you a hug now. Amazing, you are saying Pedro's going to be dead excited when I tell him. Anna's saying that he's so cute. Right, so do you see? Oh, Anna's even saying that he's muito bom, right? Do you see what I mean by creating the kind of conditions to be able to actually catch the kids at being good? Right, so this is what I mean by showing them the speaking brief, speaking about the speaking brief. Now, was Pedro perfect? No, he wasn't. Did he make language mistakes? I think we'll all agree that he did. But I think you'll also agree that his presentation was well structured. And the reason why it was well structured is that he had the brief. And as Annabella's just saying, he was also fluent. So that accuracy wasn't a big deal when it came to his presentation. Regina, I agree. He was still very nervous. And that's why speaking is really that pyramid with those three pods. Right now, Annabella is saying that we have to motivate them to be even better. So I'd like to show you my next student. Her name is Clarinha. And Clarinha in the beginning didn't want to do a show and tell at all. But now that we've been practicing, she's become just a little bit better. Are you ready to see her? Here goes. Right, there we go.
Today I want to talk about my favorite animal. My favorite animal is a dog. Dog is brown and white and small. He can run fast, but it cannot fly. Dogs are a pets. His name is Cookie. Dogs are fantastic. Thank you and goodbye.
Fantastic! Wouldn't you agree? So have a look. Did you notice the conchinha? She didn't get the conchinha 100% right. She wasn't using her hands, but she was already using her arm. Did you notice? Did you notice how she pointed and how she used her body language? So Catarina's saying that's amazing. Dina's saying muito bom. Annabella, fantastic. Guido, well done. Right, now I'm going to ask you for some very concrete feedback. Because if we want to catch the children at being good, we need to give them the kind of feedback that will allow them to be even better the next time. So can I ask if you've ever heard about the sandwich technique for feedback? Can you just type in the chat box? Thank you, Natty. I'll be sure to tell Claudine that you think well done. Right, Regina, great progress, right? The miracles that we teachers do. Right, so have you ever heard about the sandwich technique for giving feedback? Let's see. Yeah, Annabella, feedback is very important, but my question is, have you ever heard about the sandwich technique, or is this new? Is this new for you, Luis? Don't worry, I'll explain. So how do you make a good sandwich? Well, to make a good sandwich, you need a pãozinho, and there's a lot of good pão in Portugal. Then you need the filling, whatever you want, queijinho or presunto, or if you're greedy like me, queijinho and presunto. And then another bread on top. And we're going to follow the same approach when it comes to giving feedback. So when I give Pedro feedback, I'm going to start off by saying one thing that he did well today. So can we go back to Pedrito? What was one thing that he did well, right? Did you notice that he wasn't reading? There was no papelino. He'd learned everything off by heart. So I could start off by giving him that feedback. Pedro, well done. Today, you didn't need a paper. You knew everything off by heart. Now, for the important feedback. One thing that Pedro can actually improve, right? So one piece of advice that if he does this, his next show and tell will be even better. And it's really important that you think about what you are going to type in the chat box next, because Pedro is making lots of language mistakes. If I say you need to improve your English, is it viable for him to improve his English from one show and tell to the next? Well, not really. So we're going to have to think about something that's very, very, very concrete that he could do better next time. And I'm going to invite you to type in the chat box anything that you think that he could honestly improve next time, right? Anything that's concrete. In other words, if he does this, he will be even better. Well, Regina's saying relax a little bit. Yeah, Regina, now remember, we need to explain to Pedro what this means. So perhaps relax could be, Pedro, next time to show that you're not so nervous, you can hold the pen. And as you speak, you won't look like you are as nervous as you are. And if he does this, then honestly, in the next show and tell, I'll be able to give him more feedback. Annabella is saying practice a little bit more, and Teresa agrees, right? So you're on the right track, but if you practice another 3 times, you'll be even better. Alshanda is saying body language. I agree. The conchinha, Pedro, we didn't see the conchinha. Next time, don't forget. Right, now we're going to end off with one piece of feedback that was so good that we want him to repeat it the next time. So could I invite you to type in the chat box one thing that you noticed that he should absolutely do again? Now, while you're thinking, perhaps I can give you a suggestion. Did you notice the adjectives that he used? Did you notice that? So all the colors that we learned in class, he applied them direitinho. And this is what I would say, Pedro, I love the way you use those adjectives. Next time, use them again. Muito bem. I could imagine your turtle perfectly. Another thing that I would stress would be his drawing. Do you remember his drawing? It actually looked like a turtle. Pedro, the minute I looked at it, I immediately could see that you would be speaking about a turtle. Next time, make a drawing that is that good. And as Lena has just said, if we give this kind of feedback at the end, the students will be feeling confident. So, what is the secret to catch kids at being good when it comes to show and tell? Well, I would defend that it all starts with the speaking brief. We need to give them that feedback so that they know exactly what topic we want them to speak about and what the different parts of their presentation are. Then we need to spice things up with the rubric. Remember, the children don't come with the teacher's brain. So it's important to explain that if Annabella wants a muito bom, she needs to do this, and this. Direitinho, Annabella. But if Pedro is happy with a bom or with a suficiente, then he can let go of many different things. And if you put these two things together, then what do you get? Well, you get Pedro and Clara. In other words, you get to catch the children at being good. Now, time is up, so you know what I'm going to say next, don't you? Glory, glory, this is just the beginning of your amazing speaking story. I'd like to say thank you very, very much to those of you who've joined us today. It's been absolutely amazing being with you. And I also want to assure you that you don't need to spend a lot of time making speaking briefs because I can't tell you anything, but let me just say, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, that we've made your life easy peasy. And so when you get the new baby, you'll be getting a few surprises. Can I also invite you to come and be with us in about a month's time so you can see the new baby? Thank you so much for coming at the end of a long day, and I hope that you've enjoyed the webinar as much as I have enjoyed being with you. So a very, very big beijinho. Thank you so much, and thank you to Porto Editora for giving us the opportunity to share our practice with you in the classroom. Claudia is typing in and saying lots of beijinhos. So not only from me, but also from Claudia. Thank you so much, everyone. And on this note, I'm going to love you and leave you. Bye-bye. See you soon.